Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I rise tonight to speak also on the National Disability Insurance Bill. And I want to start off by going back to some words I spoke in my maiden speech in this place about the fact that we live in a land that many people in the world can only dream of. And for the vast majority of us who benefit from and enjoy all that this nation has to offer, we actually have a responsibility to give back where we can. First and foremost, we've got a duty to defend and develop those things that preserve our democracy and freedom, but secondly and importantly, we have an obligation to reach out to those amongst us, and indeed those beyond our shores, who for many reasons don't enjoy the same security or quality of life. And so in that speech I made the point that we stand here, and certainly in my case I stand here because there are things that we can do better. And I recalled standing in the home of a sole parent who was in desperate need of respite and support for a disabled child. And her daughter was so physically strong and aggressive that they lived in a house remote from other people, with locked rooms and a fenced-in veranda. And that is no way for a young family to live. We can do better than that in terms of those conditions. And we can do better in terms of the system that we put in place to care for those people with a disability. That's not to say that everything governments of either persuasion in the past have done have been bad. There have been some good measures, and I particularly recall in my former life in the other place, working as the chair of Minister Bruff's Policy Committee for Families and Communities, and the money we put aside for respite for older carers of children with disabilities. And that's an issue that is significant as people age and their children continue to need care, and the additional funding that was put aside there made a real difference, and particularly at the Country North Community Services up in Clare, to see the difference that that funding made in a regional community was fantastic. Likewise, at the Elizabeth Special School, the package that Minister Bruff announced for some $190 million for children with autism, which, again, governments of both persuasions have done good things, and the Howard government was lost government soon after that announcement, but this current government continued with that program, and it's had benefits for people across the nation. And certainly the Elizabeth Special School has been one place that is now a real focal point for young people with autism and their families. But some things have not been so good. I remember the extensive debates around the Commonwealth State and Territory disability agreements between the Commonwealth Government and the state governments in terms of how the funding models would work, who would meet need, how you define need. And the real shame of that whole process was that whilst we sat and with very good intention tried to work through funding programs and priorities and principles and partnerships and struggled to find agreement, families, carers and those with disabilities were not getting the support they needed. And so whilst there were offers of large amounts of money for that, the problem was we didn't get the partnership that was required. And the people we've let down has not been so much us or the system. The people we've let down have been those who actually need the care. And so it's one of the issues that I'm very happy about with the National Disability Insurance Scheme, that we have already seen through the COAG process a number of partnerships signed up between state and territory governments, and I commend governments at both the federal and the state level for achieving that. All of us in this place know that the system is broken, and certainly the Senate inquiry, and I sat through one part of that in South Australia, more than 1,600 submissions made that point loud and clear, that the system needs reform. And we know all too well that depending on how somebody acquires a disability or where they live can make a marked difference in the level of support that they receive. And there's a certain inequity about that I think in Australia in 2013 it's not before time that we are seeking to address. Whether you acquire an injury through the workplace and therefore have some form of compensation or insurance, to cover it, or whether you, for no fault of your own, receive a disability at birth and then families are left, in some cases, largely to their own devices, is remarkably inequitable to those people. And so it is a scheme that, to quote Mr Tony Abbott, the Leader of the Opposition, it is a scheme whose time has come. And I think it's important to recognise that this is a scheme that has had strong bipartisan support. I welcome the comments by Senator Thorpe, who recognised that both sides of politics have recognised this as a scheme that's time has come and it needs to be implemented. The Coalition has supported the scheme along each of the major parts of the process. We supported the work of the Productivity Commission. We also supported the allocation of the $1 billion in the last budget to get the scheme on the road. We supported the 5 launch sites, and I'm particularly pleased to see that South Australia has signed an agreement to be one of the launch sites. It's a fantastic opportunity, particularly starting in July this year, for those people with children aged up to 5 years who will receive support. And over the next 2 years, that will increase up to include children aged 14. And so it's not a silver bullet to fix all the demand all at once, but it is a start. And it's a start that has bipartisan support, which means for the families who need that support, who need that care, it means that it is a program that hopefully will not be subject to the changing whims of politics and changing governments, but will be something that will continue, that they can start planning the future of their families and the ones they care for. Now, there's no definition at this stage in terms of the move beyond 14 years old in South Australia, and I certainly look forward to working with members on both sides and in both houses as we articulate the funding models, the rules around the scheme, and how the programs at these launch sites will be expanded so that everyone who has a disability and who needs support can plan for the appropriate support that they need into the future in South Australia. Any of the comments that we make as a coalition about the NDIS are offered in that spirit. We do recognise that there are still things to be worked through. It will vary, country areas to city areas, state to state, and so there will be hurdles we come across, there will be issues that are unintended consequences, and so comments that are made with a view and with an intention of highlighting those unintended consequences and getting the best outcome for people with disability and those who care for them. And I would encourage people in government and the crossbenchers to receive any coalition comments in that spirit, in that we strongly support the scheme and seek to improve it as we can. The NDIS is a person-centred scheme, and this is something certainly through the work I did in the other place when I was a member for Wakefield and supporting Minister Brough, was one of the large failings with the current model where it's capacity constrained, there are frameworks put in place that may or may not match people's need, and to a large extent disempowers people who have a disability and those who care for them. One of the real strengths of this scheme is that it seeks to empower people, and certainly wherever the person with a disability has the capacity to have inputs into the planning and the decisions that are made, it provides, in fact requires that input, which is a really positive thing for that person. Where that's not the case, then other arrangements will be made in terms of the carers or an appointed person. But the bottom line is it will be around enabling a person to use a resource in the most practical and effective way possible that meets their priority needs. And certainly working with communities in country areas where some of the more established forms of support are not so readily available, that flexibility is just crucial. There was nothing more heartbreaking than speaking with people who have a desperate need for respite, but living in a country area, when they finally get to breaking point at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night, the only respite they have is 2 to 3 hours drive away. And by the time they get there and drop a child off at an emergency respite and have a couple of hours sleep in the back of a car, they've got to pick them up the next morning and come back. And so being able to use resources to find ways to have local solutions to local needs is one of the most powerful parts of the NDIS, that certainly the Coalition has certainly fit very comfortably with our philosophy of empowering individuals where we possibly can to take control over their lives. We certainly welcome that as a key part of this scheme. The other thing that the Coalition has offered is the concept of having a bipartisan, or in fact multi-party committee co-chaired by the two major parties to implement this scheme. I'm disappointed that to date that hasn't been taken up by the parties, but the Coalition's offer, restated again by the leader, Mr Abbott, is that should there be a change of government later this year, that would be the intention of an Abbott-led government to create such a committee so that we can harness the good ideas, the passion, the support of people from all parties in this parliament for the benefit of the community of Australia. Because at the end of the day, if any party in this parliament seeks to make this scheme its own, the people we actually disempower are the Australian community and those with a disability. This, of all things, is one of the areas where we need to recognise that true leadership is to serve, and that by being here and by being leaders in this nation, we are here to serve the interests of those who elected us and put us here. And certainly the Coalition comes to this debate in a spirit of bipartisanship. We offer that now, and should there be a change of government later in the year, we extend that offer. I welcome the initiative of the NDIS. The Coalition is pleased to support it, albeit with some comments and amendments along the way, but I offer it our support.
Thank you, Senator.